The format is as follows. I'm going to hand over to our panelists as first. They're going to say a couple words about themselves and how to position themselves into the topic. The topic is scaling a design system and growing it, and talking about how that might affect you and what else we come up with. And after that, we're going to start with questions. Please raise your hands if you have questions, and we'll involve you. And having said that, I will hand over to Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I just got in from Melbourne this afternoon where I was at Web Directions, which was also awesome. Yeah. So, I'm...
Thanks for coming.
Alright, I'm gonna get real close and personal with the mic. So I'm Sarah. I am a design engineer at Adobe in San Francisco, where I work on our design system called Spectra. I kind of work as a hybrid designer-developer, just kind of supporting the scaling process. Ooh, volume, awesome. And some of the things that I think are really challenging when it comes to scaling a system, and this is like pretty hits home for us because we have about 250 designers worldwide and like 140 products that are being sent to market. So yeah, probably versioning and releasing is a huge one. Contributing, the contribution model, and measuring and tracking success, as well as establishing a single source of truth and avoiding fragmentation. So that's some stuff that I'm interested to talk about tonight. I'll pass on the mic.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the design system team lead at Atlassian. I'm a designer. I've got 4 designers in my team, as well as 8 developers, all working in the Atlassian design system. The things that I'm interested in talking about is similar yet different to Sarah. So we have 5 enterprise products in the cloud that are currently using our design system. Scale as well as contribution, specifically from distributed teams across the world, all trying to work on with and love and hate and the design system. So, and how does that actually translate to new products like Trello, and also scaling for users outside our core product offering?
Hi, I'm Desiree. I'm a UX writer at Atlassian. I'm on the other side of Alex because I'm on the products Confluence. I think one of the really interesting things about being on a product like that is thinking about how we can get our needs met by the platform team, but also how we do really good work and make sure that all of our customers' needs are being met while at the same time keeping to that design system.
Oh, hi, I'm Petra. The mic's a bit louder now. That's cool. I work over at Center Group, or Westfield as you might know it. I'm a tech lead on the web team there. I've worked on a few design systems in my career, and I currently help to look after one that operates 2 different brands across the range of web products that we manage. I'm particularly interested in the developer experience of building and implementing a design system, making sure that you get those fundamentals right at the first pass so that people hold on to it, love it, and then contribute to it down the road.
G'day, I'm Russ. Just come out of prison. The only reason I'm here is actually as part of my requirement. And yes, I'm still wearing ankle bracelet. My fascination is with rules around component libraries. I've worked on a number of them, and where they fail and where they cause you to cry, a lot of tears, and particularly rules around them and accessibility and that sort of thing. So that's my passion, apart from being a jail.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists. So I guess the very first question I would put to the panel is how do you define scaling in general for a design system? What do you think growing is in terms of the design system? Is it getting more contributions in? Is it more getting more items and things in there? I'll just put that to the panel. Alex, you have the mic.
I have the mic. So for us at Atlassian, scale means growing a huge design org, and then how do you get that passion and that understanding of what the design system is for, and how do you use it, and then how do you innovate in a product setting on top of that design system. So it is definitely around education. It's about onboarding new designers, and there's getting in front of kind of the way they are going to approach a product or the teams that they will be working on, and ensuring that they are, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, but are also passionate and understand why we have a design system, and it isn't a top level down initiative. It's very much owned by the people, and it is made to grow with the designers that keep joining Atlassian.
So I think that, like, when a lot of us think about scale, we think about like Facebook level scale and just having like a bajillion users and like being able to meet them all the time. So like I kind of try to differentiate first. We're not talking about like DevOps things. We're talking about being able to apply one thing to like a lot of contexts. So when we think about scale at Adobe, I think a lot of what we are trying to do is just make it able to scale, so be able to meet our designers and developers like on all their tech stacks, on all their different software, and like fit into their tool and their workflow, and just meet them where they are. So that's what we're really working on right now.
I think it also comes back to why we even have design systems, right? You've got all of these different products. You want to make sure that your customers can understand how to use all of them, and that we're making it easy for them to switch between one and another, and to go from one to start to use more. And so I think scaling a design system also really comes down to, are we building this design system in a way that's helping our customers easily understand and switch from one product to another, even though they're really different?
Okay, yeah, perfect. So, do you have any processes in place in your current design system that you're maintaining, or that you're about to be building, or that you built in the past, to ensure that scalability, to ensure that you have the ability to grow in exactly that sense that you're talking about?
I can speak to the design system that I'm about to be spending a lot more time with. We've learned the hard lesson of spinning up what is essentially a product dependency on many platforms quickly, and the whole quick and dirty paradigm means that you make a big mess for yourselves to clean up later, which sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do. But it means that we've learned some lessons, and one of the big lessons is around performance. If you're building out a very extensible library of UI elements, you want to make sure that each project that depends on your library doesn't have to include every single element or every single tool or component that's featured in that library. What I think should be focused on from the beginning is performance, of course, so making sure that your components and your bits run smoothly, and also making sure that developers can pick and choose the bits that they want to be able to include in their projects.
Yeah. There are really good points. One of the things I've seen is that friction between systems when they're built quite small, and suddenly they add products, and then 5 products and 10 products, and you often, the systems start to fail very quickly. And one of the things is trying to establish rules very quickly so that you know how you're going to deal with components that are, just for one product. So hiving off things like these are core central all products and these ones are just for a product. Simple things like that, but it's establishing rules and architectures in place so that you're ready for growth. Because often it's just a mad scramble. I'm sure everyone, it's just a shit fight, basically. Every single one is a series of failures. But if you can understand it where they're going to fail and start to build so they don't fail a little less in some ways. Does that make any sense?
When you talk about details of making sure that it doesn't fail, is there anything in detail that comes to mind that makes you confident in the setup of your system. For instance, it could be a way of interacting with your contributors. It could be something that you give ownership away. I'm just putting a couple things out there.
But I can add. Alex has stuff to say too. Yeah. So one of the things that we focus on is not only do we talk to our users, our designers and our developers, and figure out like what they want in order to prioritize what we build, but we have fairly detailed inclusion criteria because we have to establish like a modicum of trust if we're going to like send this out to 250 designers across the org, and who knows how many developers. So we have to like double, triple check that it works on all platforms and it scales in all different scenarios and screen sizes and whatnot. And it's a pretty in-depth process doing all of that work. So we try to incentivize it for our designers and developers by hopefully in the future providing a spot bonus. And also just giving them extra support for their product and how to implement our design system.
We do not have a spot bonus.
Yet.
Yet. So what we do, this is super detailed, but I think it might be interesting, is that we have something called design sparring at Atlassian, and it's basically design critique. It's nothing too fancy, but the concept of my team running design sparring across all the other product teams, where they come and bring us pieces of work that they're all doing, and there's a safe space where we can all discuss everything that all the concerns that they're having, and what are some of the challenges, the blockers that they have with the current system, because we've just done that, mess bit, and now we're in the like, okay, everybody's going to use it. Take a deep breath. And so doing that design critique in a really structured way, where it is run by myself, it's 2 hours, and there's a representative from every product, more than one, sometimes because it makes sense. So it's a really great way for new starters to come on and actually hear the types of discussion, arguments that happen in a sort of, in a robust way. And so then they are able to challenge some of the system thinking once they kind of get up to speed. So that's been a really helpful way for us to A, evangelize the system, B, make sure it's robust, and C, ensure that like what we're doing in my team isn't just locked down to my team. It's actually meeting a specific use case inside products that is then going to get in front of customers.
Yeah, I think to what Alex said, it never feels like these things are passed down from on high. Outside of design sparring, whenever they write up a spec, everyone else has a chance to look at it and comment and talk about any concerns they might have or anything that they think might need to be changed. It's a really good way to get consensus across the rest of the team. If you feel like you're being listened to and like you've had a chance to air out your concerns and they've been discussed and addressed, you're way more likely to adopt these things.
I'm just personally really interested in this because I've been in this situation a bunch of times, and what it sounds like to me is you saying that you need to take these people on a journey with you to make them understand the challenges that you're facing. But I still find it very challenging, even knowing this, to have a lot of really good designers that all try to do some really flashy thing because they have to create a marketing campaign, something that still needs to align to the brand, but it still needs to somehow use this thing. And there's a lot of situations where people just take this the freedom of saying, oh, this is just this one-off thing, I'm just going to build this thing, and this becomes literally the new large corporate website at some point, and then you have all the tech debt that is not aligned to the design system, etc., etc. I can go on further. Any thoughts around this? Like,
the dirty secret of the room is who uses atomic CSS or functional CSS? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? The dirtiest dirty secret that a lot of people don't like to acknowledge, but is a fantastic solution. So one of the things, if you've got a component library or something like that, and you've got small, medium, and large bits, atomic CSS now, atomic design now, which we all know will fail dismally very quickly. But if you've got components that are heavily driven, and then suddenly you've got this open website where there's no way to abstract them down into components or modules. Do you just let them run free, or do you give them sort of like road rules that stop them going ballistic but still hang in there? One of the ways to do it is functional CSS allows you to build a whole series of utility classes or helper classes, and you can actually steer them within boundaries but still give them flexibility to build amazing websites. So you can define things like how spaces will work, what the fonts are going to be. So they still work in parameters, but aren't constricted to have to abstract everything down to a component to be forced into the library. So that's one way to handle this with it. Does that make any sense? Everyone's just sitting there like, oh, those guys are back. But then you're into functional CSS, so you go,
That's a very important point that you raise about providing just the right amount of constraining guidance without going over the top, because it's very easy to see a design system as a solution, but in fact it's a tool. It's a starting point so that teams of designers and developers can sit together, build products more quickly, and then iterate on them more quickly, because the only way you're going to learn whether something is right or not is by putting it in front of your customers, seeing what they do, listening to them, and making it better each time. And now the minute that you start building very complicated page layouts using sample content and all sorts of make-believe fantasy designs, whether or not it's lorem ipsum, it's still lorem ipsum. And that's how you know you're in trouble and you've gone too far. Rein it in.
I'm going to challenge. Functional CSS is really awesome, and it helps you build things out super quickly, and it kind of presents your HTML as your source of truth. But the world is not all running on CSS. We have to provide for native as well, but when you have a class soup of things to create new components, what happens is that you are creating new components every time, and it's hard to switch them out, and things kind of get fragmented. So when you don't have one single source of truth, and if that truth is a little bit flexible, that's great. But when you have one thing one place and one thing another place, and something's been a little bit fragmented here with some different spacing, you kind of lose track of where things started and where they were. So the way that we're trying to do it is kind of bundle our CSS with our components as much as possible, and can encourage people to use our actual framework solutions, like our Spectrum native products and our Spectrum React products, and actually import those into their products so they can just npm update and get all of the source of truth. I've done a huge memory architecture at LinkedIn and added utility classes, and that worked fairly well. But if you're at a huge scale with a bunch of designers and developers that you don't want all doing separate, different things, then I probably wouldn't recommend functional. But it's great for smaller teams. That was a long rant, I'm sorry.
That really brings me to I swear I had something else.
Maybe the audience should have written it down.
Yes, well, is there anything that you want to ask specifically to this? Because I can think of a bunch of things, just not this second. Yes.
He's got a loud one.
Hi everyone. Thank you to the panel for being here. To get everybody's perspective. You're going to ask what's on everybody's mind, which is, Ross, what did you get done for?
Go on, tell us.
It may not have been involving human flesh eating, but that's another thing.
Our actual question is, so you all represent large organizations with various stages of maturity in products and design systems that are obviously already in flight. I've got a personal interest in what the creation process is like, that really dirty, kind of messy, then there was light kind of moment in a large organizations. How do you go about wrangling various stakeholders, various teams? How do you kick it off to get to the point where scaling becomes a concern?
Sarah just said it sounds like a manager question. When I was in that moment, I wasn't a manager. I was doing the kicking off the light bit. So for us, the move to the new UI, which is the instigation for the current design system, We call it in-house AG3, which is the Atlassian Design Guidelines number 3, very creative. This came as a top-down mandate from the founders. It was our company-wide FY17 goal. So it obviously that gave us a level of importance. Very few things kind of get top-down like that happening at Atlassian, but it was one of those things where it was a change that was going to go company-wide for cloud products, and so that helped us from that perspective. But the specific birth of the thing, there was key people in the room, head of design Jürgen, also some senior designers, as well as some mid-level and junior designers also working on the detail of the system. Also the principles were the first thing that were born out of that, and then they were then shopped around, for use of a better word, but demonstrated across all of our product offerings by mocking up all the products and ensuring, giving that kind of buy-in, what will they look like, where are we going, and what is that vision. And I think having that really strong sense of what is our vision and keep continuously checking in, why are we doing this, or improving the user experience, we're actually working towards our customers' end goals, helped us sort of shape what that light bit was when we came up with the current design system.
Well, I had the pleasure of kicking off the design system over at what is now the DTA that Dominic had the pleasure of releasing officially, I think, just a couple of months ago. Thank you, Dominic. Yeah. Yeah, there it goes. That was really wild west. My colleague and I were thrown into a team, and the team was given a mandate to build a design system. We spent a little bit of time sitting down looking at what the processes might look like if we had a design system, like how would we take contributions from the organisation, how would we distribute this thing to teams that need to apply a design system to their software, and then like how do you build a framework? Should it be React, for example, which I won't go into right now.
Or Shockwave Flash.
Oh yeah, it could have been Flash.
It's equal, right?
Sorry.
Please be sensitive to our pets.
Does anyone remember Shockwave Flash?
Yeah.
Oh. Trauma is hidden. What we ended up doing was sort of going back to our, what's the expression when you go back to what you know? We went back to what we knew, which was back to our roots, which was talking to users. And so we basically conducted a few weeks of interviews with service designers, visual designers, developers, stakeholders, product owners throughout the organisation, and asked them, well, what do you want from this thing? And so that gave us a lead, and helped us answer the question not of like, what should the button look like, or should it be in React or Angular? Thank God we didn't do that. Sorry to any Angular fans in this room.
People out there crying.
Sorry. But what are the people that need to actually use this system, and what do their processes and their needs look like? That really helped give us a shove in the right direction. And of course, then we made some buttons. Everything has buttons on it.
One of the questions, follow-up questions on this is, I've been in this situation a bunch of times before, and oftentimes when you come to a new organization, coming from a different background, you know what the answer is before, but the people that are in this organization may not be just ready yet to implement that very new, design thing, this React thing that everyone keeps talking about, but we don't know what it is. How do you challenge or take people on their journey to do the right thing in a certain period of time with the design system? There is an upskilling part to this, I believe. Have you had any experience with this?
Well, I would challenge what you said there and say there's no right answer. I don't know whether anyone experienced it. I came in, the first big component library I built, at the end of it I thought I knew everything. Then I went to the second one and all the rules had changed. And I said, now I really know everything. And then I got to the third one and I realised I knew nothing. And to come in with an expectation that we're going to build it in React or we're going to do something, I think it's much better to start from ground zero and assume you know nothing. And I love what they were just saying then, speak to users. Like, don't make any assumptions. It could go in a totally different direction than where you think it could go. So I completely disagree with you.
I appreciate that. No, what I rather meant was not lay out an answer. If you come to an organization and you feel like this is the right answer for them, it's like there was this very famous quote from the guy that invented the car. I forgot the name.
Tesla.
Ford, Tesla, who said if I'd asked people what they wanted, they said, more horses on my carriage, but really faster horses. That's right. So sometimes people don't know what they want. It's like it's really hard to ask or opinionate this process of scaling.
That's how you ask the question. I'm talking now. That's how I ask the question. If you ask them directly what they want, they might not. But if you sift through, it's like user testing. You've got to sift through it. Anyway,
Well, I mean, would you be asking them, or if they say they want a faster horse, you still know that they want something that's faster, right? So get down to the problem rather than the solution.
yeah, there you go.
Oh,
Beautifully answered.
I try not to tell people what they want because that just makes it seem like an asshole. Yeah, that's all I really have to say.
Okay, I'm the bad guy now.
You're doing great.
So,
You're doing great.
the next question. First of all, I wanted to ask a question to the audience, just because it's my personal. I don't want to say vendetta. There's another word. With the design system meetup, I want to bring together the designers and developers in one room to have conversations. And I'm just curious, who of you, by the raise of an arm, identifies as a designer as a main trait? Just to have a split. And then the opposite, who identifies as a developer as a main trait? This is fantastic. How amazing is this?
Who's both?
Yes.
Yes. I love this. This is amazing. This is what I want to build on. Okay, so moving on. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Yes?
Can we keep doing it so he has to run backwards and forwards across the room?
It makes it more fun for us.
This is actually, you set me up for that perfectly, Dom. My question was actually going to be, for those on the panel, what has your experience been getting designers and developers to work more closely together? Challenges you've found, solutions you've tried to implement, things that work, things that haven't. I'd be really curious to hear more about how you create that.
So getting designers and developers to work together is fun, but I think that a design system is actually a really great facilitator for that because it takes away so much of the overhead that we used to have with hand off to developers. So all of our red lines are just components now, so we can just label our mocks and even just wireframe them, and you don't actually have to make everything full fidelity because if you are using what's called design tokens, if anyone's familiar with that, just variabilizing all the data in your design as much as you can just label your mocks with that and label your mocks with the components, and basically your designer or your developer will probably be able to infer all the behavior because we've already documented most of that. So then you just get to really focus on what the actual interactions are and what the feature sets you're building are, and just really drill down on that.
So we want to get to what Sarah just said. Sounds really nice. Anyone else in the room?
We're not there yet.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. In reality, we had two separate teams that had two separate backlogs that were kind of in two separate orgs, all trying to do the same thing. And then came along the design guidelines, the precursor to me aspirationally naming the team design system. That one day would be a system. But the point of that is that we needed to get them all looking at the same stuff. I think doing that has been really hugely helpful to actually get the designers and developers to intermingle. They now all sit together, they look at they have the same Jira backlog, they both development and design go to the product meetings to understand the requirements, to work out what problem they're solving. So there is no longer, oh, well, you do this and we'll do that. It felt, strangely to say, very waterfall-y and bad. Now that they're looking at the same problems, there's so many more intricate solutions that are coming out. React drag and drop beautiful is one of those amazing outputs of those design development. I'm sure hope you all know what I'm talking about, all those React fans. But that was definitely a brainchild of development and design, and looking at the right solution in this with very different lenses.
Maybe interesting one to open up some thinking about longevity of these systems is what's the sort of time frame that you put into planning? When you look a year out, 5 years out, what's the sort of time frame? For example, do you have a time frame or a plan for how you'll get rid of React when we talk about it the way we talked about jQuery?
Excellent point. I don't think that that many software projects, well, I talk about software projects, but really I mean web projects or even native applications. I don't think many are planned with more than about a 1, maybe 3-year outlook. And that's for many practical reasons. I mean, I don't think you could just call that short-sightedness, because the reality is that you choose these software platforms for many reasons, and one of those is, well, what do people want to work on? And so right now people want to work on React. And that will start to change, and it's the responsibility of anyone that manages a team that builds software to say, well, how are these trends changing, and anticipate those changes and make sure that you've got skills on the team that can adapt and make sensible choices the next time they come around.
I guess.
Well, I just thought, because you probably have experience in long-term projects at Adobe.
I mean, I've only been there for a year, and I graduated like 2 years ago, so not that much, but I will say that I think that design tokens are actually a really great tool to help with that, because in like 3 years' time, when the next new cool JavaScript framework comes out, or if JavaScript, God forbid, isn't even a thing then, we'll still have this single source of truth in our variables and be able to apply that to any language, wherever we so choose.
So we're talking basically about an abstraction.
Yes.
And we're talking about just to recap, about one team, one dream sort of thing. So developers and designers come together. But one of the questions, as I read it, was how much time how much time do you give yourself to prepare for a design system? Or for me, a design system is a living, breathing product that will have to always be there and exist with you. But how much time do you spend on the fundamentals of it to make it scalable? The fine line between MVP and something that is over-engineered or something that is not scalable enough.
I don't really believe in overly planning things, because we never actually hit our deadlines. It just doesn't work. So we kind of do a rough, where would we like to see ourselves in 1 month or 6 months and a year from now, and kind of go from there and play to everybody else's strengths. Yeah, I don't really have all that much to say about that.
I think we'd all agree that the first 3 months should be just arguing on what the name of the system is going to be. And then the next 3 months should be arguing what you're going to call these things. Are you going to go atomic? You're going to call them organisms? That at least 3 months should be just spent on those two things before you go anywhere else. Does anyone else agree? Does anyone agree there?
It's like 5 months.
That's how a team learns to work together. If you're talking about spinning up a team that's going to build a maintainable product, they have to learn to speak the same language, literally and figuratively.
Chastised. Okay, fantastic. And I'm just going to answer one question. Sorry.
So yeah, I've got a question. It kind of goes on what Boris was talking about earlier on. At the beginning of the
process. I was involved in the 83 SE decision making. What font we use, what colour we use, what grid we use, all the things that we need to do, and what technology we should use. And we tried web components, and we went to React, and so all of those messy decisions. I'd be interested to know how, in your experience, you've come together to make those decisions that cost a lot of money, down the line. And if you can speak to that, even if they're smaller decisions, but just how do you do it as a larger organisation?
Somehow the mic keeps ending up in my hand. Maybe give it a second to think.
I was in that team, so I know why I was asking that question. I think the challenges for us now is, we have a design system, but to Sarah's earlier comment around design tokens or variables or other ways of extracting what is variables inside the system versus the actual technology and the platform, we need to make some of those decisions and think about the ramifications and the cost that's going to be and the value ultimately for the user, but ultimately for the company and the internal people who have to use that system. So for us, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. It's something that we feel like we should do, but there isn't necessarily buy-in right now. But we know we should do it, but there isn't necessarily buy-in right now. So that.
That was awesome. I had time to think. So, two things. One of the things is just making sure that we're actually building the right thing. So, as Alex is talking about variables, we have a system called DNA that actually we originally decided to do it the way that Salesforce does it. It started in JSON and then being able to compile to a bunch of different technology targets. But it turned out we actually didn't need to because nobody was using it in all these different targets. So it was actually adding a lot of tech debt for us and becoming more expensive. So we went back and we changed all of that. And now it's just like a JavaScript hybrid thing. I don't work on that. And then the other thing is just, I think at the beginning we kind of focused a little bit too much on the designer experience to the detriment of the developer experience. And this is the reason that that's super important is that, again, if people are plugged into your technology framework stack, they're always going to get the updates and you're going to avoid some of the fragmentation that naturally happens. So that is really just if I could go back, that would definitely be where I would put most of my focus is just getting the developer part right from the beginning. And then you can always update the designs and version things and release new things down the road.
That brings me to the next question, if I'm just going to jump in this. I find it very interesting because we touched on this before earlier, to say that, okay, maybe not atomic CSS classes for large scaling projects, but what happens if you create these more complex systems and you want to make updates and they're breaking changes? How do you deal with iterating your design system, iterating your design, iterating your interactions, animations, all these kind of things, and while doing that, bring everyone with you on that journey and make that change so that disparity between all these different projects don't happen and people have upgrade anxiety, etc., etc.
That's a really good question and one that we're probably struggling with the most right now, specifically because we have all these projects on different release cycles. Some go through one release every 6 months and they go out for max and they do all these crazy things and they need to be able to commit to one version of Spectrum way before all of that stuff. So we're trying to meet them in the middle. I think that we overwhelmed a lot of designers and developers when we started just releasing things all the time. We were like, oh man, continuous delivery, this is awesome, updates everywhere. But they were like, crap, everything changed. Where did everything go? What happened? So we've been kind of struggling this and just figuring out what we really want to do with it. I don't have a super good answer, but I think right now we're developing a system to sort of measure and track everybody's adoption. And going from there, we're going to start using that as a way to figure out where everybody is and get them to commit to a certain version while they go through this tracking process. And I'm hopeful that that will help us sort some of that out.
Anyone else? It's definitely a problem that I myself encountered a bunch of times before, and I think it's one of the things that maybe you have some answers to, obviously. Yes, please. We're all
Tell us.
But yeah, it's one of those things where you want to take everyone on a journey, but by breaking changes, you're also breaking the trust in the system, and if people don't feel inclined to use it anymore because they feel like they're using a moving target. And that, to me, just means that your design system has to be slow. But we don't really want that, because I feel like we're slowing everyone down at the same time, so there's a fine line. Yeah, there's a question.
So hi, Mike from Partially Design Systems. So first of all, Russ, as always, love your work. And Sarah, I love the way we're talking about abstracting designs through to tokens, or just abstracting away from technologies. I think that's really important. But I'd actually like to ask a question about governance. So I think design systems live on a spectrum from highly controlled and too controlled, where there's no freedom to do anything, and something we talked about earlier, the wild, wild west, where people do whatever they want. And there's a sort of sweet spot in the middle, and there's a level of governance that helps us make sure that whatever we're developing works in that. So.
I could talk to this point specifically. Governance is something that we struggle with, but it's also something kind of comes and goes in terms of being a problem space for us. So specifically, we released a new design system. A lot of the front products committed to architecting it in the front end. But once that has happened, now we're kind of looking towards a place where we're looking at updates to the design system based on use cases. So it's very much like, what problem are you trying to solve for your specific user flow? How are the components, the DOM components that we've supplied, not meeting that specific use case? Like, what do we need to augment? And now we're going away from Avatars 1.3 to this specific solution for Jira projects that will be, so it's kind of getting away from maintaining all of it at the same time. Like, sort of to Sarah's point, we're also looking at instrumenting what's actually being used and what do they like about it, and how are those things going to actually, what are we going to maintain at the end of the day? Because to your point earlier that we were having that conversation about deprecation, and like that's also part of the design system's job to actually unpack and unload the design system from the crap, basically, that kind of gets built up in there that you just keep maintaining, thinking people are using it, but are they really?
Yeah, I think also to what Alex said, it doesn't feel like our design system or the team that's working on it are gatekeepers. It feels like they're working with us. So when we say that there's something that isn't working for us, or that we think there should be a different way, this works, or we want something else, it feels like we can go to them and say, hey, this is why I think this should be different. And yeah, I think a big part of that is just how you work together. If whoever is working on your design system is open to having those discussions and changing things or exploring different things at least, then yeah, I think that solves that problem, at least that's
Sorry, this is going to be a long one. So, as I was talking about earlier, we have this tracking system. It's called Spectrum Scorecard, and we're just piloting it now. And it's basically a way for us to just assess where everybody's at and actually, like, in an objective way, score them on how they're using our system. And one of the things we do at the beginning is a self-assessment with the product, like, are we even meeting your needs? Because there's such a massive diversity of products at Adobe, anything from like an analytics dashboard to, like a rich timeline in After Effects or Premiere. We can't really get to everything, so that kind of helps us track to where we are and like what we need to address next. The other thing that for governance is really important to us is we just launched about a month and a half ago. This what my project was called Spectrum Precursors. And when I was talking about trust earlier and all of our inclusion criteria, we originally didn't have that, and we had just like a bunch of different components, and like there were way more than what we have now because we upped this criteria and made it much harder to get into the system. And like, that's great for us because we can manage it well, but everybody else was like, where did all my stuff go? So in order for us to move faster but still maintain our level of trust, we made this app called Precursors that is just like a big beta holding level for all of these components that are like in use, created by designers at Adobe, and just not quite ready to be in the system like all the way. So we actually let designers upload their own stuff there, and we have like a moderation panel and some people on our team that are super in charge of reviewing everything and communicating with the designers that submit. So that's been a really great tool for us to kind of get everybody on the same board.
It sounds fantastic. It's the first time I heard of it, and I feel like that's a great way of also showing what everyone is working on, and you have this one space to look at it and critique it and help them. It's awesome.
And we get a little bit of consistency for free just because everybody gets like inspiration from everybody else.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so my next question would be. We have a few questions.
I've actually got 2 questions. So
failing.
The first one is kind of a gimme in terms of what's your pitch to enterprise to justify taking the time to go and build one of these design systems. So to your friend's point of we're in the dark, we haven't got one, but we're delivering, and stakeholders seem to be happy, they get anything they want. How do you tell them to just go away for a little bit while we build this thing? And that sort of leads into the second point of, on an enterprise level, when you're dealing with a variety of tech stacks. So you do have Salesforce, you do have AEM, and you're trying to implement a design system that's all follow material or Angular, and you get the buy-in at a senior level and they're going to spend the money for FY19. How do you control that and still say, oh, we can deliver a system across all of this?
I guess I'll start since I have the mic. I just forgot what the first question was.
The long question. Say it again.
2 questions.
Oh yeah, so I wasn't actually there for this, but the story that I heard was that our manager Gavin went to our VP of Design Jamie, and he asked how much percentage of our designers' time do you think that is spent on red lines, like documenting all of your designs, and we were like, maybe it would be 15 or 20% at most. She was like 60%. So we were pretty taken back. So what we did is we multiplied the average designer salary by that. We were like, so if you give us all these people and all these resources to build this, we can save you millions of dollars a year. So apart from like selling on the vision of consistency and great user experience and stuff, that was pretty helpful. Yeah.
So our founders from Atlassian are very heavily involved in all parts of our products. It's creepy how they can pop up on any page and make a strange comment. But so they, from a very long time ago, have always sort of understood the value of a design system. They hired our head of design, Jürgen, and in his first week, he told them that what they wanted to hear, which is like, you have 44 drop-downs. So, and this 44 drop-down kind of became the, I guess, the metaphor for our lack of consistency. And that to grow, we need to have consistency regardless. So I think with them wanting to grow, they wanted consistency, and it kind of became a natural extension of that.
Okay, cool. The language of enterprise is funny sometimes, and I've spent most of my career in an agency environment where I'm either part of a project team working on site with a client or under the mushroom of an agency, you know, sitting amongst your pretty pictures and cool music. It's very nice. It's great. The wine is good. But I'm new now to the corporate environment, so I'm starting to understand the ways in which these streams of money are distributed. And thankfully, the organisation that I work for currently is shifting its focus significantly to the customer value zone. And I think that's where most organisations are going based on my very narrow experience and reading on the internet. And so if you're going to talk about the ability to deliver value to customers, then you have to understand how and why things are delivered. And so if you're going to build multiple products for the web or for native applications, and you want to apply a brand consistently, I think it just becomes a no-brainer to start talking about enablement. You're going to start taking for granted that you need certain cloud systems in place, and you need a common UI language. And so when you start to talk about developer experience and the ability to move on and deliver customer value very quickly, it becomes much easier to sell these things in, rather than establishing, oh, well, we have to build a framework because it delivers X. Well, no, we have to have these things in place so that we can deliver to our customers. It starts to look very different.
Do you mean only like managers and CEOs, or also designers?
Just after this one. So we've got the money.
Okay, cool.
Okay, fantastic. There's a bunch more questions.
Did you have 2 questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I must have fallen asleep.
Hi, good evening all. Thanks for the time that you're spending on clarifying these things for us. So now, I work at a large company, Harvey Norman, but it's not a very progressive company when it comes to things like design. I know what's design, we just do setting. And the way it's structured, it also makes it hard because the priorities of the engineering team are actually different from the design team, and we don't report to, or don't remotely report to the same verticals. So it's a design system, so it's we as designers are trying to create something that looks like a design system. My understanding is that there are many phases in it, right? You start with some sort of you have your patterns, and you have maybe the typography, and that you might end up with something as fantastic as the ADG, where you actually have the whole kit, and the framework is in place, and people can just pick it up and start coding if they wish to. What I want to know is it possible to begin the journey without too much support from engineering, from devs, from front-enders? I know at some stage it's going to be impossible to make it successful without them, but just given the situation, can we begin the journey, maybe take those first 3 or 4 steps? For example, I know typography, I don't think they have a big say in that, or an interest in that. I know we can start with that. But patterns and what else can we do before we kind of hit the limit to what designers can do without any buy-in or support from devs?
I don't know if a dev needs to answer this or a designer. I'm a little bit concerned. There's a lot of giggles to this. Do you want to answer it?
I'd love to answer.
Oh, there you go.
I know, because you're one of those devs that put your hand up at the beginning, weren't you?
I thought the aim was to bring people together.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I'm going to answer it really quickly. I think getting those principles in place and getting, in terms of the grid, the colors, the typography, the voice and tone, that is a place where you can make true kernels of a system to actually get bringing in the marketing and the web presence in the same headspace. So even if development isn't coming on board right now, you can talk about this from a holistic user experience. And I think focusing on your customer and making sure that their touch points with your brand throughout your marketing and to your products actually is a cohesive thing, because you actually have control over all the visual outputs for that. So that to me feels like definitely the place where I would start with a non-engineering buy-in, and then get one on your team. Just get one that looks like a designer but actually can code. That's where you start really. But I won't go.
So I feel like I'm that guy that you're talking about. Maybe.
I think you need a job. Do you want to?
Maybe.
Do you want to talk about that? I think he needs one.
But anyway, so in my opinion, as that developer who's got that design background, I think that you can definitely start in the design area, because if you look at the history of design systems, you go back to style guides, which is all PDFs. This is the color that we use. This is the different brands of typography. This is how we apply our logo, etc., etc. But you're going to hit a wall at at some point where you need to say, this list of things is actually a reusable thing that can be used with this other reusable thing. And until you have that developer there that can go, this is actually a reusable set of patterns that we want to use in this other reusable set of patterns, you're going to be like, this is a design, and this is a design, and this is a design, and they might have slight inconsistencies because you don't have that developer sort of eye potentially looking at those things and spotting those consistencies early on. So, for instance, you may have a color palette that the developer might see that as, hey, actually you've got one color here and then a whole bunch of shades of that color. So in reality, your designer may come to you and say, here's this massive color palette. The developer might go, great, you've got 4 colors there. So I think it's really important to get that developer on as early as possible because they're going to spot those little things like reusable things, reusable patterns. But at the same time, I still feel like a designer can get the ball rolling, but you're going to have that conversation earlier on.
I'm just going to add a little bit here because I feel like a little bit of a Debbie Downer on this one, but I'm going to say that I don't think you can take it all that far without developer buy-in. And the reason for that is that I don't think a lot of developers are really, and of course there are exceptions, but as a group they're not really incentivized to kind of put out really great things because it's just it's not a tracked goal. And if you can't track it, then you can't sell it. Yeah, and you can make all these great typographies and some awesome colors, but a developer is going to look at that mock and maybe they don't get it completely right, but they get halfway there. But how many people actually get to the point where they go and they look at a finished product that's almost out the door and they say, okay, now all these 10 different things are wrong, but you should wait to ship for another week because you need to fix all these things. I don't think it's all that common, and I don't think that an engineering manager is going to prioritize that kind of thing because that eats into their bottom line. So I feel like if you can sell developers on the actual benefits, like Alex was saying, you get built-in unit testing, you get to have way less work, and it's all very likely that you probably have something like this. Most developers are using something like Bootstrap already, so you can capitalize on that as much as possible from the very beginning.
Just to build on that, regarding Harvey Norton, for instance, if there's a work stream or a multiple set of work streams that are happening, and something's about to change, or you know that the business wants to do something, there's an opportunity there. But one thing I would advise to do is to quantify what's there already and look at the metrics that they're moving and use that as the baseline. And then when you introduce the new design language itself, you actually have something that you can prove is quantifiably better than what was there previously. That win can lead to another win, and eventually you can kind of point out the value of a design system, which should only really be customer benefit really at the end of the day. There's one answer here.
Yeah, I've just got a point I could add to that as well. So, working for an American company probably 6-7 years ago, replacing one of the large force banking system, and I was told that by my development team that I was okay to have my patent library in quotation marks, but I couldn't tell them how to design and that they needed a reusable design component. But we started with that and we started to show benefits, and after maybe 3 years, I think, something ridiculous, they came on board when they finally had a client who refused to sign off on the end product because of the inconsistencies in the build. So it's definitely a starting point. It's by no means the ideal, but it's an avenue, definitely.
I think the other thing I'd add is make your developers feel like designing. We have a great designer named James Bryant who wrote this long thing about typography, and we just had a whole lot of developers comment on that and be like, wow, this is making emotional, and they got really involved. I think Tony over there wrote another thing about using me versus you in our products, and again, a whole lot of people just got so behind that, and then every time I would go into any meeting, they'd be like, I read this thing that said that what we should actually be doing is using me, not you. And so, yeah, you can do all those things, and that's a really great way to get people to, 3 years down the road, buy into whatever you want. But if you can get people to emotionally connect, if you explain to them why you should be doing these things, and instead of sounding like you're telling them this is what you should do, but involve them in the journey, make them feel like they're involved. make them feel empowered, they'll do it for you.
Sorry. Sorry. Another benefit for developers is just like, if you just tell them, if you have really great guidelines with your design system, you're probably going to get blocked by design way less, because there's always way more developers than designers, and there's never enough time to do so.
I was going to answer that from like a developer's perspective as well, and I'm kind of echoing some of what Sarah just said. But I think, speaking as like someone who's sort of self-identifies as a developer and a designer, developers are lazy. We want to do the smallest amount of work possible.
Everybody's nodding.
All the developers are nodding because they know it's actually true. This is why we use tools that automate our work for us. This is why we like unit tests. We try and sort of be most effective. So if you combine that concept with the other suggestion that I think is really true, the sooner you get a developer buddy on your side as possible, the better off you are. There's this thing called nerd sniping, where if you show a developer a problem that is interesting enough to them, they will start working with you on it. So you can kind of put all this together, and what you're really looking for to get, I think, broader buy-in is how is this going to make someone's life easier? So something that I've done successfully is I try and sell a pattern. Like, hey, here's the thing you need to do. I've got this solution already for you. Why don't you just use that? And if you can sort of set up the initial parts of the design system based on like, here's the thing I see it's doing everywhere, I'll just write that down so it's easier and people don't have to think about it next time. It sort of starts building momentum that way. And if a developer could work with you to put, some of those patterns in place, like, oh, hey, just lift this bit and use it. That's actually the start of a design system before you need to call it a design system. And eventually people say, oh, can it do this as well? Like, what if we did that? Like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to do all this work? And suddenly you've got yourself a design system mandate. In theory, it's probably not going to quite work out like that, but good luck. I was going to launch straight into a question. I actually had a question before that even came up. Are we ready for another question?
Just to wrap up that one. I wanted to say something too, because we all have opinions.
Does anyone else have anything to say other than these two people? Yes, you. Not you. The actual. Yes. Yes.
Someone new?
Yeah, somebody new. Thank God.
I don't know if this is a question. It's kind of more of a statement, I guess, from my. I'm a bit old. I think for designers it's really important to be very, very light touch and to work incredibly collaboratively with dev and to make it as light touch as possible, that you keep style guides and design systems as code driven as possible, and to actually literally sit shoulder to shoulder with dev and not to totally engage in creating really too detailed and too specific guidelines. And if you feel that you're co-authoring something, then it sinks. And
I think this is sort of the recap of this question. I think a design system in general should try to bring people together. If you're trying to create a design system, you're trying to create a community. You're trying to make people excited about this thing. And the better you are with this, the better the design system is going to be, because you're going to have champions that are going off into wherever the organization is and helping you. And I think that's the gist of all of this sort of. I got that right?
I just want to add one thing as well. I think that if you go and ask the developers, you'll find, in some sense, there's probably already the beginning of the design system there. Developers, when they're going out to build a website, as Jen said, they're all lazy. So they're not going to use the same color over and over again. They're going to turn that into a variable. They're not going to build the same component over and over again if they can componentize it. So I think that there's already probably the beginnings of a design system inside your products. And I think if you go and find the developer who's working on that, or someone who is, who has spent some time with it, that's a really good start to building that connection.
Bootstrap actually started at Twitter because the developers who initially created it got sick of doing the same thing over and over again. They're like, oh, we could just make this a reusable thing. And then they stuck it on GitHub, and now the rest is kind of history.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up because we do have only one more question left, and then I want to give us some time to mingle afterwards, and not just pound you with lots of information and discussions here. the last question that I had that I would like to pose to the panel is, can a design system be too big? Where do you see a design system being too intrusive or too large? Is it a management thing? Is it an overview thing that you can't adjust it anymore? Etc. Is there any opinions on that?
I don't think that size is really a metric that we're worried about. So much as just, are we building things that people want to need? So I would say that no, as long as it's pretty maintainable and has a solid foundation.
I'd say it's too big, that's too inflexible and too prescriptive.
Like I said earlier, design systems are tools, so if you spend more time maintaining the tools than you do your products or your output, then something's wrong.
Alright, so is there any more questions?
That was the last question?
That was all. One more.
Last question.
But I felt like that fell short.
Mike? See, that's a developer. They walk through the crowd because it's easier to go around.
Lazy. I love that. So yeah, given that tech is always changing and we need to do what our users want, our users are also always changing, what can we define as success for a design system? When do we find that? When do we get to the point where we say, okay, we want this platform, it's done.
Never done.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's a good question, and that's something that I think about a lot at the moment. So for me, the people in the room are going to like this, especially on my team. The long goal is like for my team not to be a team, for the design system to be there in place, and for people to understand with a couple of rules what we mean by the system, and then how they can extend it in a way that isn't constantly maintained and loved by one team, because I think the success is the way it can scale and the way it can be onboarded into and just used, and it's easy and people get it, and that to me what success looks like.
Can I have one more?
Oh, what?
This one's actually about developer experience, which has come up a couple of times, but we haven't heard much about it. And I think as a designer, if you're successful with a design system, then there's some obvious ones around consistency and stuff, but as a developer, I think if you're successful with a design system, you actually have this massive level where it's this one thing that you can do in an organization that increases productivity across all the other developers because they get a common set of tools to use and build on. And that's the theory. I'd love to hear your experience on how that works out in practice.
I don't have a super good answer to this, just because I'm working on the design org and I'm a bit siloed, but I have worked as a software engineer that used a design system at LinkedIn, and it was hell awesome. Just not having to build the same thing over and over again and not having to think about the framework implementation details is great. And also having the power to make changes and fix things is really awesome. I think most developer framework design system parts are open source within the company. So we can file issues, we can actually fix things ourselves, which is super powerful. We're not dependent on anybody else. It's just when I don't have to test it as well, and it comes with the testing suite. That's great. So.
Yeah, I feel like in my team, the developers are a lot more involved in design because they have these things they can start with and say that, hey, should we be using this modal and should we be doing it this way?
The developers should be put in a dark room and kept there, kept away from the system.
There's always one.
You joked earlier, Russ, about spending 3 months deciding what to call things. And I know that you were only joking sometimes. It doesn't take 3 months, sometimes it takes 9 months. But I don't think it's flippant to joke, because really the heart of this stuff is having developers and designers working together and using the same language to describe things. And when we stop talking about mocks and builds and actually realise that we're working on the same products, and we will share the same language, and we'll realise these things are all means to an end.
What a way to finish.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.